Hello, YouTube. This is Tim Cain. Do gamers know what they like? Now, if you know me, I like to yap, and I'm going to have some very strong things to say right off the bat. I like to equate it to eating, to food. I think that in general, you know what food you like. However, there are different ways that food is prepared, there are different ways it's served, and there are different ingredients used in the same types of food that maybe you weren't anticipating or didn't know about. And all those things can mean that I think, yes, gamers know what they like, generally. But that doesn't mean that they are sold the thing that they saw on the menu, right? If there's like a picture on the menu of what you're buying, and the thing you get is very different, you're like, that's not what I ordered. And I think you can equate that to like marketing, right? So marketing plays a big factor in whether or not what I've just bought or what you've just bought on Steam is this the thing that you expected to buy. We'll see what Tim has to say on it, but I think that yes, gamers generally know what they like, and that doesn't mean that they will like everything that they buy. But for the most part, if I look at a game on Steam and I say, yeah, that looks like something I'd play and like, most of the time it's correct.
Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Today I want to talk about the question, do game players even know what they like? I almost called this Game Players Don't Know What They Like, but I figured it would lead to a better comment section if I posed it as a question.
Yeah. I mean, I get the point. I think that a lot of game designers will. We joke about it behind the doors, right? But it is a reality where players will say, hey, we would really love this feature. And in most cases, a good game designer will be like, yeah, but okay, you don't really want that feature. Or at least you don't want it in the way that you're referring to. And I think that sometimes players will like see a problem, formulate a solution as a community, but oftentimes not know some of the ways that the balance works or certain systems work, in that that solution is not going to end with good results. Now that doesn't mean that players don't know what they want. I think that their feelings are right. That if a player feels frustrated, a developer can't tell a player that they don't feel frustrated. That's not how that works. But that the player might come up with a solution and say, this really is frustrating. It would be better if blank. Might not be the best solution, or might have consequences much further down the line that the player doesn't always see because it's not their job to see that far ahead with like a game. And then it could cause further frustration, right? So those are my feelings on that. You don't know what you like, but definitely know what I don't like. I think so. I think players are willing to try new things too, from time to time, if it's like a genre that they don't usually try out or a game type that they don't usually play. But it's always like for instance, it's the same thing with food. Again, I don't think that I would like sushi. I don't much like fish. I like rice. Seaweed in some cases is like, oh, I'll eat it. But I'm not a big fan of fish. I anticipate that if I have just like bog standard salmon sushi, I'm probably not going to like it, but I could surprise myself. People complain about inventory size in some games a lot, but they just don't see how big your inventory will make things worse. Or like carry weight. The frustration stems from that they don't like being over encumbered. So they think getting, and this is we've had a reaction to Tim Kaine about carry weight before, right? They think getting rid of carry weight is the solution. But then they often will find that they now don't have any challenge when it comes to inventory. And maybe that's what some players want, right? Inventory modification mods are some of the most popular mods for any RPG that releases if the game has inventory capacity. So clearly, some players do know what they want. But I think that it really just stems from other things affecting the balance, right? There might just be too many enemies that drop really good gear that you want to sell, but they all weigh a lot, right? So it's like you go kill a group of 10 bandits, you could at most take 2 of the chest plates and a couple of the swords. But they all sell for such high amounts that you almost hate leaving that behind, knowing that they will despawn. Well, your issue isn't that the carry weight limit is low. The issue is that the balance between how many of these things drop, how many you're expected to sell to have a maintainable like economy, and then the fact that they despawn almost makes you feel guilty for having to leave them behind. So all these there's so many different moving parts behind some of these systems that the solution of just get rid of carry weight for this example would not it's not really a good solution to the problem. And if you want to have that dynamic of the player having to worry about how much they carry, I think there are better ways to accomplish that. I'm sorry, Tim. I'm yapping 20 seconds in. Let's keep going.
Let me tell you why I thought of this. I was watching a comedian podcast, not a comedy podcast. I wasn't watching comedians do stand up. I was talking about comedians talk with each other about being comedians.
Yeah.
And one of them made a comment that it's very hard to come up with jokes in a world where audience only know what they find unfunny. And most of them couldn't write a joke if their lives depended on it, especially a joke that you could say in stand-up. And I thought that was interesting because, first of all, I've met a lot of people who think they're funny and they are not funny. But also, stand-up comedy is a perfect example of it doesn't require any equipment or anything. It's basically you and it's pure skill. And there's a lot of people who think they're good at it who are not good at it.
Well, I think too, it's like there's different stand-up is not just jokes. Stand-up is oftentimes, bits that connect to each other. So I mean, maybe back in the olden days, you could get away with just standing up on a stage and saying knock knock jokes to the crowd, right? But when people watch stand up, they want to watch that special where you have those intricate tie-ins of different parts all moving together until like that final bit which connects something from earlier on in the set, right? That's always the classic one. And that is difficult. And I do think a lot of people, I mean, I've always wanted to try stand up. I don't think I'll be great at it, but I've always wanted to try it just to see if, yeah, maybe hidden skill somewhere, right? But it is really hard to write those kinds of jokes that work on stage as opposed to just writing like a funny book joke or something that has no connection to anything else you'd be saying in the next 55 minutes, right?
And I thought that was interesting because it was purely skill based. But what the comedian was essentially saying is it's hard to get feedback from an audience because they'll laugh when you say something funny and groan
yeah,
or boo when you say something not funny, but they're not actually telling you what it is they liked and didn't disliked about those jokes. You only know whether it was a hit or a miss.
Mm-hmm.
This is similar in the game industry, but what really knocked it home for me is someone mentioned a George R.R. Martin quote, which I looked up. He was talking about readers, book readers, and he said, quote, "Now social media is ruled by anti-fans who would rather talk about the stuff they hate than the stuff they love." Unquote. Now,
I mean, I think that's true just in all forms of media, where the negativity of something gets more attention than the things that are positive. Look at any sort of game that releases and has like a couple of buggy features. I mean, I even think Stalker 2 is a pretty good recent example where for a lot of people, I mean, and this is not to say that the game didn't have problems. Not at all. So don't misquote me or think that I'm downplaying the fact that games shouldn't have crashes or whatever. But it overlooks the fact that the rest of the game, by and large, is pretty damn exceptional. A lot of work and a lot of care was put into making this world and this game and writing all these stories and branching narrative, and it's great. It really is a tremendous piece of gaming that we have for this last year. But nobody focused on that. And I mean, you see it with like reviews of restaurants or Amazon reviews. If people have a good experience, they're probably not likely to write a review. But if they have a bad experience, a lot of people are willing to go out of their way to write a bad review if they have a bad experience. And I think that's just the reality. But I disagree with Tim that it's hard to get negative feedback in game dev. I think it's a lot easier than it used to be. Back when you had to like rely on forums. Now you have Steam reviews, and you have a lot of like Steam sales encouraging players to leave reviews, which is nice. although a lot of them are like kind of memey, but it is really easy through either Steam forums, through Steam reviews, through Discords, through YouTube videos to receive feedback of why your game isn't good, or just watching like a Twitch stream. I think that it's hard though to get I think it's harder to get feedback with viable solutions. Not impossible, but again, it's not the gamer's responsibilities to come up with viable solutions to the problems they face. Right? They're the customer. All they have to do is say, "I don't like this. It's bad." Now, it would be great. It's great if you can say, "I don't like this because it's like this or it feels this," or attach a screenshot or whatever. That just helps contextualize the problem and helps developers solve it faster, especially if it's like a design problem, right? You say, "I don't like the inventory capacity." Like, okay, well, what were you doing when it gave you this feeling? Because when you started the game, you had no inventory. So it clearly wasn't a problem then. And then you can learn, oh, it's because you met this bandit camp, they all dropped amazing equipment, you could only pick up 10% of the items, but they were all exceptional, and that led to a feeling of frustration. And maybe the feeling of having to leave an item behind it's good, we want that, but not at a ratio of 90% of the items you leave behind and only take 10. If anything, it should be closer to the opposite. So I do disagree with Tim that it's hard to obtain that. I just think that again, you don't know if you're talking to a player who kind of understands their own feelings very well, and even sometimes as a game designer, I can't really pin right away my feelings of why I don't like something in a game. Sometimes it's like, okay, this isn't feeling very fun, but I need to sit and think about why, and then word it in a way that will make sense as a game designer. But not all players can do that. They can just say, "Oh, the game was unfun." Why? Well, I wasn't having fun playing it. Why? I don't know. It just wasn't fun. It's like, okay, well, I don't think I can solve the problem then, because I don't know what the problem is.
Now, whether or not social media is the cause, I don't know. That's a whole other discussion. I don't even want to have it.
Yeah.
But I do see a rise over the decades of my career in how games are discussed in person and online,
Yeah.
which is a prioritization of the bad features over the good. People love to talk about what they hate. And some of them almost never even mention what it is they like. What would they prefer instead? And
I mean, if doesn't that even go just deeper into like player psychology? Where what am I think? What am I trying to say here? Before I got distracted by pausing Tim at really unattractive times. I'm sorry, Tim. I don't try to do that on purpose. What would it be if we're still apes, gorillas, okay? We're running around the forest. We just wear clothes and we stand upright. What is the biological reason or the psychological reason or the whatever the correct word is for why we would focus on talking about bad things instead of good things, even though science has proven we bond. Wait, am I correct on this, or do I have it backwards? We bond more over things that are good for us than things that are bad for us, or is it the other way around, where we bond more over? You know what? Let me look it up, because that might be the reason, right? Do people bond more over positive or negative things? People tend to build stronger bonds through mutual dislike versus shared positive feelings. Okay, so I did have it backwards. People just like to bitch. No, but I think this is I don't know okay, look, this is like a piece of the puzzle. I don't know the reason people bond over mutual dislike more than shared positive feelings. But I do believe that this is part of the puzzle of why people tend to talk and focus on negative things that they agree are negative. I don't get it. Especially because when we like positive feelings, when they make us feel good, you would think that the shared positive feelings would like make you feel included. I don't know. Maybe it's multi-factor where if a game is receiving mostly positive reviews, right, versus mostly negative, the you might bond more over loving something because you feel included in that group versus being part of the minority, even when you tend to build stronger bonds versus with mutual dislike. So that might also explain why it's tougher to criticize a game that is overwhelmingly positive, like Baldur's Gate 3, which I've voiced some criticisms of, versus a game like Dragon Age Veilguard, which is pretty mutually, everybody's panning that game. There's a lot of problems with that game. It's easy. It's hard to like that game because then you're going against the flow. Makes life easier if you know that a tiger will kill you. Talk about the bad things you know to know what and who to avoid. Maybe it's like a protection thing. I don't know. Hard to explain why you like a thing, express feelings. Some people will think you are weak for having feelings, so it's easier just to say I hate. I'd really love to know what it does to people's brains when they have those shared negative feelings versus shared positive feelings. I really like. I'm not gonna say, oh, I graduated behavioral psychology. I just love to think about behavioral psychology because it feels like it's still this little like unexplored ocean of humanity that is always churning out things that we don't understand. And to me, I think it would be cool if there was a way to reverse this for gaming, right? Where we could, I mean, it would be great if we could reverse this in general so that we could share it. But it affects social media. All we do is talk about negative things on social media. All we do is talk about negative things about games. I agree with Tim. Look, I love to complain. I love to bitch too. Maybe I'm part of the problem. But I also like talking about positive things with games too. I don't know. I don't know. That's a different conversation of how we can solve this problem because I don't know what even the root cause is. Hey, on things like hey, drama will get you more content and clicks. Yeah, but that's the thing is like why does it get more content and clicks? We know people bond more over mutually disliking something, which means that it by nature it should receive more clicks and interaction and engagement, and that's what is paid for. But what is it in the human psychology that makes us bond more over things that we hate, even though positive feelings are better for like life expectancy and our anxiety, our stress levels, our everything. Everything should point at us wanting to be positive with each other. And yet we just all go towards negative. I don't know why. Asmongold makes a video on I Hate Colder Chronicles. He probably would. By the way, Asmon, don't play my game. I don't think it's a game for you. I don't know why Monkey Brain likes drama. Yeah, I don't know either. I think that's really what the core of it might be. We're getting on so much of a tangent here, but it's to me, I feel like that's something that if we can solve that and we can find a way to, with sunshine and rainbows, build a gaming platform that encourages positive interactions like that and sharing positive feelings about games. Yeah, it would be great. It would be great. But it's not that we should get rid of negative things, just that it would be a nice ideal.
Prefer instead. And I get it with the rise of monetized channels. I totally understand that rage bait gets more clicks.
But
So if you go
why?
on and have a channel and you go, I hate this and these people are dumb and blah, you get more clicks just because that's what people respond to. But it doesn't really explain forums or comment sections where the people who are leaving the comments, they have no stake in how many people read their comment. But still, you find that complaints about features are on the rise, and constructive feedback saying, I wish they had done this instead, or I like this in my games, is on the decline.
I don't know. I think it's where maybe that. I think I already mentioned this, but I'll reiterate because I don't remember if I already mentioned it. If you have positive feelings with something, if I'm playing a game and it's just good, it's playable, it's fun, I have no reason to go out of my way to do anything other than to continue enjoying it. But the moment that that friction is put in, unintentional friction, and I'm not having fun anymore, and I'm feeling frustrated. A good example would be, okay, we just use like Stalker 2. Stalker 2, there was a room near the end of the game. If you watched my playthrough, you know the room where I was just like, I love this game, but the room is horrible. It's horribly designed. I hate it. I hate everything about it. And I will remember that room over a good portion of the rest of the game, which I enjoyed and had fun with. Maybe it's just like something related to the chemicals that are released when you have those negative feelings is more it's like pain, right? It's like you're learning not to do something. You've put your hand in a hot stove, but this is like somebody else is putting your hand on a hot stove. And now you can't trust that. It's like, okay, you've done it to me once. When are you gonna do it to me again? And so I guess maybe it's just like it's triggering the same receptors that we would get with something painful and something we don't want to repeat, versus the things that we do want to repeat is just kind of like living normally. Maybe, I don't know if that makes sense. Just like the saying, you can do a lifetime of good things, and if you then just do one bad thing, everyone will notice it and grill you for it. I think it's similar. I think it's very similar to that, where there's something that triggers in our memory when something bad happens, when we experience something bad, and that way we kind of go out of our way, maybe as like a mutual what's the word, like validation. Like you're looking for validation that it's okay to protect yourself against this and warn others of this thing. I got that childhood trauma. I don't know. I think it's maybe it's related or it's similar in psychology. But it's just so ingrained in our being that we don't know that it's happening, but we all know that it's happening. That makes sense. Like we nobody knows the reason why, we just like to get rage bait and all bond over some shitty situations. But we all know that that's the reality. I gotta look that up maybe in my free time.
On the decline. At least at the very minimum, the ratio has been increasing from bad to good.
I think that it's because it was always there. But like he said, the monetization of it, and I think also it was either you, Frades, or it was you, Dramox. You said that it's like, it's Dramox. Yeah, you said that it is it's forced, like the algorithms themselves are are amplifying our own instincts, and our own instincts are to share in the negativity, which is why it's not like YouTube or Twitter is showing people more extremist content or negative content. It's just amplifying those core needs that are already there. That if you start clicking on more negative content, you will start seeing more negative content. So I don't have the problem that other people's do on Twitter. I have no reason to go to Blue Sky, because on Twitter I just follow like game developers, game dev news sites, and cute nature videos of animals. And so that's literally all I see. People have to eat, so they have to capitalize on it. Why wouldn't they exactly? Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that Blue Sky is good or bad, or that Twitter is good or bad or anything. It's just like I don't have the problem that other people were reporting, because I don't engage in the content that I don't want, which is negative content. It's the same reason I deleted my Facebook, like over a decade ago. I don't have an Instagram. I will never have an Instagram. Um, I just don't like engage in that stuff. I assume negativity bias is pretty inherent in our evolution survival. I think so too. Yeah, I agree with you, animosity. Start scrolling through brain rot content, the algorithm will feed you just that. Yeah, they're just amplifiers. I think YouTube is the same. And I don't know if that should be changed. Like, the demon and angel on my shoulder, like one of them is saying, yes, if the algorithm started saying this is positive content and gave a higher weight to show people that, maybe it would result in people feeling a bit more positive. Like, same thing with social media, right? And like news channels. But the other part of me is also saying, well, people have the right to engage with what they want. Okay, what about this? What if people had the option to modify their own algorithm a bit through like a weight? So it doesn't stop showing them negative things, but it will through like some ratio show you 3 times more or two to 3 times more positive content than negative content, even if you're watching something that you're only watching negative content. I would love to see A/B test of people doing that and just see how it affects their daily mood. Very interesting. Very interesting to see. Okay, sorry, Tim.
The weird thing about this is I see people complaining about features that they can 100% absolutely ignore. Yes, the game has that feature. Yes, the game is 100% playable without the feature, but they complain that the feature exists. Like, oh, it's there, it's looking at me.
What's a good example of that? Because I do agree with him. I just can't think of any example off the top of my head. An optional piece of content that players complain about but don't need to engage in. People hate just having choices. I mean, I think players want. I think that it speaks not about players. Well, if you don't like fast travel, just don't engage in it. Okay. Let me think about that. I don't remember what I said during that video. I think I also said if you don't like it, don't engage in it. I was thinking more along the lines of content, not systems. Fast travel to me is a system and it's not content. I'll say this. I can agree with players who get frustrated that they engage with content, like optional content in the game, and that content is bad. Because that's not really like a system that they can like or dislike. It is, oh, I expected this to be on the same level of enjoyability as the rest of the game, and it is not. Like an unfun mini game or something, right? I will agree with myself though, where if you don't like fast travel, don't engage with it. I don't know how to make that a better experience for the player, other than making it a gameplay option that you can toggle, because then it feels like rather than having to make the choice 100 times throughout the game, you make the choice once and you feel as though the lack of ability to fast travel is your choice rather than something that you're being like peer pressured into taking, like, oh, just eat the chocolate, just eat it, you won't get fat, no, you'll be fine, just eat the chocolate. You can just swear off chocolate at the start of the game, and then it's like that's your choice as the player. Maybe there's a difference in feeling there for players, so it's like, okay, if you don't like it, just turn it off in the options. But it also could be related. Okay, this is I'm getting really deep in this, but it also could be related to that the lack of it. If they don't like it, not having it is a bad. It doesn't make the game better, right? So it's like what's another example Tim used in that fast travel one? It was about quest markers. That's a good one. If players don't like quest markers, but the game itself does not provide enough context to solve quests without markers, I think that's very valid for players to complain about. Like, that is a system, but if you don't like how it's implemented and you choose to ignore it, the other option of it is so bad and unenjoyable that the only realistic way to play the game is with them on. I think that's maybe a better example than fast travel, where I agree you can't just turn that off and ignore it. I like quite a few optional things that affect gameplay, things that can make your playthrough a bit harder if you want to. And thinking if I lock those once you start a new game session so you can't change and have more impact. I know for one of my games that I worked on, the train game, the kind of like train simulator, but it's Euro Truck on rails. There were some things that we had to lock at once you started the game, but other things that we were supposed to be able to unlock, but I think due to a lack of time, we never made it unlockable, which I hated. Especially because I designed it so that, like, if you wanted to just turn on infinite money for that play, for the next couple hours, you could.
This comes up a lot about microtransactions. They're games that have 100% cosmetic only microtransactions.
Yeah.
People will still complain they're there, even though those transactions in no way make the game easier to play, or it's not pay to win, it's just a cosmetic microtransaction.
But they might not make it easier to play, but if the cosmetic overrides of base game armor are so much better than what you can achieve in the base game, I can agree to an extent with players who don't like that they're playing the game as it's intended, but they will never, ever, ever look as cool as somebody who spent 10, $20. Because, it's like, why have character customization? Why have models of what your character is wearing if you will never be able to achieve the same cool look as the people who paid money? I'm not saying that all cosmetics need to look shitty, but just that there needs to be a balance, right? And if it's like this, if it's so lopsided that you have to spend money to look cool, it's a bad feeling. Like, what's the point of upgrading? What's the point of this cool looking armor if it will never even compare to how it looks if I spend money? So I agree with Tim to some extent, but I'm in the middle. I agree with players to some extent. It just depends. I got some hot takes about game dev, but I'm going to keep them to myself. Better that way. Oh, you got? I mean, you can share them. We like talking about hot takes. I mean, I think that I've already said a lot this video that I think players might disagree with. So one thing I disliked about PoE 1, knowing that you'll always look shitty if you don't buy things. Yeah. I think PoE 1 though is I don't know. I'll defend it, but I'll also attack it. So I have spent a few $100 in PoE 1. Obviously, if anybody who plays PoE 1 knows that you need to spend about $60 to buy the stash tabs that you need to get through the game. It just is the way it is. The nice thing about that, I think you can pretty much spend a little bit of money to get some. I don't know. You're right. Like, you're right. I shouldn't try to justify it. Other than I don't think it's that. No, you're right. You're just right. PoE endgame stash space and looking like crap. Yeah. The nice thing is though, if you like PoE, if you get through the campaign of PoE, which you don't need to have extra stash tabs for, I think you'll know at that point if you're ready to spend, the $60. And they do stash tab sales every month. It feels like every month. So you can get all the stash tabs you need to get through endgame, and you don't need to buy the cosmetics. But I agree, there's nothing that looks that cool in PoE 1 that cosmetics don't automatically just blow out of the water. My argument was going to be that it's pretty easy to just buy a supporter pack for another $30 and get enough points to buy, a few the loot boxes. I just don't think it's a very valid argument. Dash tab sales every third weekend. So yeah, every month you'll get one, which is pretty cool.
I've mentioned this before, and people's response were, whoa, some of these people are spending or gambling addicts, and they can't control themselves, and this is predatory, and it's horrible. But then I did a fast travel video.
Wait, what is the... Wait, hold on.
Transactions in no way make the game easier to play, or it's not pay to win, it's just cosmetic microtransactions. I've mentioned this before, and people's response were, whoa, some of these people are spending or gambling addicts, and they can't control themselves, and this is predatory, and it's horrible.
I don't understand that counter argument. Oh wait, Tim. Okay, but hold on. Yeah, Tim is defending microtransactions. Well, look, here's the thing. Just because I don't want to include microtransactions in our games does not mean that I don't like microtransactions. I think that most of the time microtransaction implementation is predatory, but there are games that do it very fairly. I will defend PoE to some extent here, where, yes, PoE has pay for convenience. Simple as that. It does not have pay to win, but sometimes the convenience is so good that you need it in order to actually progress. However, because the stash tab sales happen every month. They're not like some rare event, and they are even you have prior notice that they're happening. The amount of money you need to spend on PoE1 to get to a reasonable point is not a price that is overwhelmingly bad. In fact, I would say that PoE1 is pretty fair if you just want to buy a couple of the main tabs to get through, like map tab, currency tab is all you need. That's like $30, I think. That is a very fair asking price for what is a free to play game with an extensive amount of replay value. I think that's fair. And it doesn't make any qualms about that. And you haven't if you play PoE1 a lot and you go to PoE2, you will find your stash tabs still there. So I think what GGG does is not predatory. It is not misleading. It is just not the most consumer friendly. Where it's like, this is just microtransactions about cosmetics. You don't need any of this to play the game. You do need the currency and map tab if you want to do endgame. It's just the reality. And like the fragment tab. He does that because he knows that a game dev studio needs to make money to stay afloat. Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's like, it's not that I'm not going to. It's not that I hate microtransactions. I just don't believe that I need to develop my games with them. I can make premium games and make money off of it. From Software does this pretty well. Supergiant Games does this. Insert hundreds of other developers that make money and stay afloat by not having microtransactions. It's one way to make money. And if you have a free game, how else are you going to make money? Name the source that is viable. I just think that there's varying degrees of ethicalness, ethicality, whatever, of the microtransaction implementation. At the same time, I'm just saying games don't need hundreds of millions of dollars to get made. Yeah, I think gacha games are another good ones too, where some of the gacha rates in games are very fair, and I think okay. And then you have Genshin. And if you've played Genshin and you've played other gacha games, you'll know that Genshin is extremely hard to get any reasonable drops. You could argue that it's pretty pay to win at the later stages. It's a fun game. I actually like Genshin's gameplay. I just think that the monetization is very, very unfair.
But then I did a fast travel video, and I'll link it below, where I said, well, what about fast travel? There are games. Now, you're right. Some people brought up there are some games that aren't designed well. So if you don't have fast travel and quest markers are harder to play. But there are a lot of games that you do not need to use fast travel.
Yes.
And they even have some difficulty modes where you can't. But guess what? People still do it anyway. Those games are provably that fast travel was not necessary to play the game or even to enjoy the game, but almost everybody does it anyway.
Well, it's like sauce though. You know, it's like if I go and I buy chicken nuggies, right? Classic dish over at Mick Expensive. I don't need sauce to enjoy them, but I can get sauce and I can enjoy sauce. I think that yes, most games with fast travel aren't unplayable with fast travel. Wait, hold on, I'm all jumbled up. Games with fast travel are not unplayable without fast travel. But there's an amount of convenience that is saved when using fast travel that I think players opt for if the game's in between periods, if walking in between point A and B is not more interesting than the content that they will get to if they fast travel, right? So I can go from A to B and walk and receive some content and then receive my content that I need to get to, right? My quest or my dungeon to explore. Or I can fast travel from A to B and then get to the content that I need to get to. Which, in most cases, or in a lot of games, this part is more fun than repeating this part. So why wouldn't I just jump down here and do the more fun stuff as opposed to taking more time doing less fun stuff? And I think that that's what designers would need to solve in order to encourage fast travel. Why down them raw? They go down much nicer with a nice sauce. I don't know. Sometimes I like the flavor of the chicken or like the batter, and sauces can sometimes overwhelm it. It just depends. Gacha games are just slow effort. They disguise themselves very well with looking well made. I think that a lot of gacha games are. I am one of the weird. I will defend Genshin's gameplay. I think Genshin is a pretty well designed game. It is relaxing. It's got pretty engaging combat. It's got some, a variety of content to engage in. The level design is pretty good. At least in like the beginning 20, 30 hours of the game that I played. I don't know how it is later on. But I think Genshin is a good game with a lot of pay to win and unfair microtransaction, rates, like gotcha rates. Worth hundreds of millions. Well, yeah, it's easy to design a good game when you have enough money to pay good designers. Although, still, somehow AAA developers seem to fail at that. I would say that 400 million or 300 million, whatever it was for Dragon Age Veilguard, somehow they hired bad narrative design, bad narrative team as a whole. Pretty good combat team, though. Good combat and great art team.
There's no gambling component. And people will then go, well, it's more convenient or something like that. But they will do it even when non-fast travel rewards them by giving them fun encounters or new location discovery. They will still use fast travel, which makes the game a lesser experience for them, but they can't seem to bring themselves not to use it. And then
yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that Skyrim is a good example of this, right? Just because it's something we've all played and we all know. Yes, walking between point A and B, like walking between Whiterun and Riften, will undoubtedly unlock a million other things for me to do. But sometimes the knowing that is more overwhelming than knowing that I'm just trying to go to the Thieves Guild. So I'm going to fast travel to Riften because my goal for that play session or for that next hour or two is to get part of the Thieves Guild, not to explore. So I think that fast travel is one of those things where it's not that every gamer either does it or doesn't do it. It's that I think when it's well designed, players will choose when they want to engage in it and when they want to explore and go between point A and B naturally. So I think it's one of those things that it's not that it should be turned on or off, but rather I think it is okay. I think it's okay as it is. Maybe if that makes sense. I don't know. I don't know anymore. What is a designer even worth?
and that's when they turn around and say, well, it's the designer's fault. He never should have put that in the first place. Which is, again, a whole other discussion of how much handholding do you want? And handholding in this case is how much should the designer not let
Not
you
even.
pick and choose how you want to play the game? Should he force you to play it the way that you want to play it and is the way you'll enjoy it and ignore millions of other players? And I'll get to that because a lot of you give feedback as if you're the only person on the planet, but you assume your views represent everyone else.
I mean, that's incredibly common. I know he said he would get to that, but that just exists everywhere. I'll let him get to that.
I'll get to that.
Okay. He's being
I've
generous.
said before in many videos, if players
like
would only talk more about what they want instead of what they don't want, this would be so much better and so much clearer and so much cleaner feedback. It, first of all, it gives developers a much better idea.
Because I think it's kind of like the saying, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. A good song too, by the way. I think it's easier for people generally, and maybe it's part of games, maybe it's everything, but it's easier to identify the things that would make your experience better than to accurately nail down exactly what's making your experience worse. I see people who say I'm not playing X game until X person reviews it. I feel bad for people like that, where the opinions of someone else dictate what they will do. Yeah, I mean, I think we all know it here, but just if it needs reiterating, don't let anybody tell you what you can and can't have fun with. If you love Dragon Age Veilguard, and this is your favorite game ever made, I'm happy. I disagree with you, I'm happy. I'm happy for you. Because all I want as a game developer is for people to love games. And that might not be my game. Most players in the world will probably not be interested in playing Cauldron Chronicles. My game is meant for the people who I expect will enjoy it. That's who I market to. That is my audience. And inevitably, we will mismarket the game in some tiny way. Somebody will hear something about my game, get the wrong impression, play it, and hate it because it was not what they thought it was. And the best we can do is to try and make sure that that doesn't happen through good marketing. People nowadays are afraid to express their opinions just because others will shun them and they will be then left out of a certain group. Yeah, yeah. Like I said before, I think that that happens a lot with games that are like overwhelmingly positive but have clear issues. If you look up any sort of discussion on like Reddit or whatever, and Reddit's only one place, but it's easy to find them there. Discussions of Baldur's Gate 3 Act 3. It is pretty unanimously agreed that it is a sloppy act. And yet the game sits with, 9, 10 out of 10 reviews. But for me, that sloppiness in the third act, which is, again, pretty universally accepted, is a kind of a game changer for me. Because that's the finale. That's the city. That is Baldur's Gate. That is where everything should be coming together. Where the finale of so many characters in the main game happens. And it felt really fumbled to me. And so that brought down my personal feelings of the game, even though Act 1 and 2 were pretty damn good. But because the game is so well received, it's hard to have that talk. Because admitting that the game maybe isn't that 10 out of 10, again, that's just opinion, is difficult because you'll then get lambasted by the people who can't or don't want to criticize it. Like Dark Souls games, Elden Rings, and I'm not afraid to say it. Hey, not every game is meant for us, right? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Of how many people want those certain features. If you just say you don't like fast travel, but you don't say what you want instead, they're not sure how to implement that fast travelless game. Do you want more encounters? Do you want a paid way of doing fast travel? Do you want a resource intensive way of doing fast travel?
Yeah, but I mean that's expecting players. I guess that comes back to the question of do gamers know what they like? I think expecting players to know the solutions to game design problems is like expecting a what's the word? A customer at a restaurant to know how to fix their dish. They might just say that it doesn't taste very good, but it's not like they're trained in knowing how to solve that problem, in knowing that the sage and the salt is a bit too high, or there's too much sauce and not enough of the raw, whatever. Don't say a paid way for. I think he means like in like Fallout 76, you pay a little bit of caps to fast travel or something like that. I think that's what he kind of means. Something like that, like in-game currency.
What do you want? Because doing nothing is 100% giving you not fast travel. But that's probably not what you want. You probably want something in exchange for not having the fast travel. And if you think this should be as simple as putting a checkbox in saying, does turn off fast travel, you can see my video on doing difficulty, where there are people out there that think certain options should be decided by the designer, not the player, and therefore should not be provided in the options menu.
Now we reacted to that, and I agree. I think the example we used actually was from software games, right, which don't have any difficulty options. They're considered hard, although I don't know. It depends. I agree with both. I think that again, it just depends on the audience. It depends on what you're trying to go for. Is there a social or it's usually a social thing, right? Where being able to beat a game is that shared experience you have with somebody else. So when you say I've beaten Elden Ring and another player says I've beaten Elden Ring, you know that you beat it with the same hurdles, the same uh, issues and challenges that you had to go through were also challenges and issues that that player had to go through. Likely unfair. I disagree. I think Elden Ring is very fair. It's pretty easy. But I don't want to get into a topic about Elden Ring. We can talk about that like when we're just developing something brainless in game. Um, what was I saying? But for other games where there isn't that social, like facet, where beating the game is some sort of like accomplishment within the fandom, like Mass Effect is a good example. Nobody is gatekeeping people from Mass Effect because they played it on the easiest difficulty. Because the importance of that game it isn't related to the challenge of that. It's related to the characters and the choices you make. So players will shun you more in the Mass Effect community if you kill Rex than if you played the game on the easiest difficulty. Guarantee it. I have nothing to prove that is true or untrue, but I promise you it is the case. I will bet a lot of money on that. So it just depends on what kind of game you're making. And if you're making a game where it's like for Colden Chronicles, our game is an RPG. It's set around these choices you make. And I will probably have difficulty options in there too. I don't know what yet, but I probably will. I don't think that the community is going to care whether or not you played with, if you save scummed or if you played with infinite gold. It doesn't matter. What matters is the choices you make and how you solve those problems. And that requires strategic thinking. Stand by unfair is designed with it in mind, and of course you can overcome that as you can most things. Okay, we'll talk about it during during a stream or something, not during this video.
They basically say, don't make me decide how to play your game.
But you're banned.
Just be aware that there's no good solution to this because there are lots of players out there who want lots of options. They love playing around like, oh good, the game lets me turn off the HUD. Oh good, the game lets me turn off fast travel. They want that. They look for that. So there is no good solution for a developer. The problem is when people just tell you what they don't want, it's hard to get an idea of what the percentage is of people who want an alternative. It's like, okay, I know you don't want fast travel, but what do you want?
Yeah, and it's also that, like I said, people who enjoy the game are not likely to specify that they enjoy like a system, let's say. But the people who dislike that and don't want that will make their voices heard. So it's easy to get a forum thread filled with 50 posts in an hour of people who want something removed. But they may just be not the silent minority, but the vocal minority here. And I think that's one of the biggest difficulties of a game designer is filtering that and deciding, is this enough people that it needs to be changed? And then, of course, you might have those 50 people and 10 different feelings about how it should be fixed. So now it's like, okay, I can fix it. I feel like it might be enough players that I should fix this. Which of the 10 solutions that is going to appeal to 5 people each should I implement? Because the other one's going to leave the other 90% of players unhappy. Or the 90% of dissenting players. So, I mean, Tim's right. There is no perfect solution. Everything you do will make people hate your game for some reason. And you just have to be very careful about what you do and how you do it. You're walking on eggshells as a game designer.
Do you want more random encounters? Do you want a paid fast travel? Things like that. Or if you're tired of me talking about fast travel,
that's funny.
I've done 2 different videos on encumbrance. And
we've reacted to both of those videos.
There are plenty of people who think that how items should be available and what should happen after you pick them up should be handled differently. Read the comment section. I'm not sure people were reading them. People were leaving comments saying everybody hates encumbrance. And then literally the next comment was, oh, I love when games have encumbrance.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure people read the comments because there are a lot of comments where people love to say categorically, no one likes this, everyone hates this, right after a comment or before a comment of somebody saying they like it.
I've said it once, I'll say it a million more times. There is no, and maybe Tim would even disagree with this, I don't know. There's no such thing as bad game design, in my opinion. There's only game design that doesn't work for your situation.
Like it. So please take a look at the comment. In fact, let's talk a little bit about how to comment.
How to comment.
Like I
I love
said,
that.
I would way prefer on this channel and for any forum where you're talking to game developers, say what it is you liked, especially why you liked doing that feature. I have an entire video on how to give good feedback. It's called Being Constructive. It's way easier to respond to constructive feedback than non constructive feedback. So, what I don't understand is if you really want to get what you want, say what it is you want.
I mean, here's the thing. It's not every developer is good at social interaction. I would maybe even venture to guess that there's a pretty high subset of developers, a pretty high percentage, who are not very good with social interactions. Leading off any social interaction with immense negativity, even though it is your right as a customer, and I will defend that, probably is not the greatest way to start things. It doesn't mean you need to do the, good cop, bad cop, or sweeten the deal here and say, I love this, but kind of thing. Though it does help. I think just be like try to be as emotionless as possible. And what I mean is don't talk about your emotions, but say, I was playing through this level. Like, let's use the Stalker 2 level, for example. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, probably a good thing. There's a certain room in Stalker 2 that I got tilted as hell at. So angry. My feedback after I've calmed down should be, Dear Stalker 2 developers, dear GSC, there's this room near the finality of the game where I was playing on the hardest difficulty, and I felt as though the room was a bit unfair with how it spawned enemies. I was unable to even get really far into the room without taking any damage, and responding to that damage then made me incur more damage when I was unable to output it, right? Because I was spending time healing when I should have been spending time shooting, but because the number of enemies was too overwhelming, I couldn't do that. And I could just say that, and probably the designers would know kind of the issue. Or I could say, I feel as though the enemy spawns should be gated a little bit, or you should only start with the enemies on the ground and then spawn the ones up in the rafters. Not, this room fucking sucked. Who the hell are you, GSC? Why would you ever think that this was a good idea? This was the stupidest room. I hate you. I hate your game. I loved your game up until that room. This room sucks. Bad review. No Chinese translation. Horrible experience. Negative review. Downvote. 10-hour video essay about why I hate it. You are the worst. That VC is probably not going to get the greatest response from humans. Just my personal thoughts. GSC, your game sucks because of that room. Exactly, yeah. Much easier to say. It is easier. And then you get the clicks and views. The room was unfair, then swap the easiest difficulty, problem solved. I mean, yeah, I could have done that. But to me, there was that social need to stay on the hardest difficulty. And I felt like the rest of the game, it's like, that is where the unfair comes from, is that the rest of the game was it was pretty even in terms of fairness, I felt. But that one room was such a massive spike that it was the obvious outlier to that problem. And that's why I would say that, yes, the game on the hardest difficulty was challenging, but that room was completely unfair to that. Implying that Joey's not a good enough gamer. I'm not very good of a gamer. But I'm also, like enough of I'm mature enough to say, okay, that room clearly was a 0 out of 10 experience I had with the game. But I will not let that tiny experience mar the rest of my review of the game. Because that's such an easy thing to fix that it isn't some implicit issue with the game. It is just that one room in one section probably just needed different spawning mechanics. And that's it. It could be fixed in a matter of a couple hours max by a developer, probably even less time than that. It's not like to say that, oh, I didn't like the fast travels, or I didn't like the lack of whatever, something that is just core to the game that would take so much time to fix that they're not going to fix it. It was one room. So I don't know. It's also expecting that everybody who plays a game can separate their emotions from what they write, and I can't blame people for feeling so bad about something that they immediately jump on and want to voice that feeling. I get it. Just that there is a time and a place for that, and I don't think that if you want something from the developers, that lack of constructive criticism is the best way to obtain it. Everyone are just dumb for taking as personal insult from the game does if the gamer can't go through the game on the hardest difficulty. I mean, yeah, I mean, look, I agree with like in the end, play the game the way you want to play. If you want to play with cheats, if you want to play Elden Ring with some difficulty mod that makes it easier, I'm not gonna get mad at you because your experience with the game affects me in no way. It doesn't. It's not a multiplayer game where if you played with cheats, it affects me, right? It's a single player game. Do what you want to do. Have fun. The most important thing is that you have fun playing a game.
Now, some people just like, no, I've got to say what I dislike. It's not fair. Saying what you dislike is just as useful. It is.
It's how you say
if it's specific, which many of you aren't. There is a video I have called "Feedback Needs Context."
Yes.
So you need to watch that.
Everything needs context.
But let me give you the high level example there, which is, if you just go, enemies are dumb. Stop giving us dumb enemies. Okay, you just give negative feedback, but you give absolutely no context.
Yeah, it's like, do you not like that they have near perfect accuracy with grenades? Okay. Do you not like that they don't know how to hide behind cover? Okay. Was it one specific level or something, or was it a specific type of cover that might be bugged? Yeah, game is bad, developer's bad, 0 out of 10, refund.
So it's not like they can go in and go, hey, programmer, can you click the checkbox for smart enemies? It may be that what you meant was these enemies never take cover. There's cover all over the place that I use, but they never take it. Oh, you want enemies to take cover more frequently. Okay, that's constructive. I can work on that.
Bad.
So think of it as a wish list too. Like imagine somebody came up to you and said, hey, what do you think Tim Cain would like for his birthday? If you said he would love a dark chocolate bar, at least 65%
I was going to say chocolate.
Versus he hates white chocolate. What do you think is more likely to get me something I want? The first one, I'm going to get a dark chocolate bar that's at least 65% cacao, which immediately puts it in a range of chocolate that I absolutely adore. But the person who said he hates white chocolate, I may get a Snickers bar. Well, I don't want to go back on Snickers. Snickers are okay. But you can see that just saying I hate white chocolate, maybe they're getting me a boat. I don't want a boat, but they're like, well, it's not white chocolate. This is why it's so hard for developers to deal with your negative feedback. You're not telling them what you want. Just telling a developer what you don't want, guess what? The space of what you could want is huge, and you're not helping.
Well, also, I think that a lot of players will give that kind of feedback, and they won't understand that them saying this thing is bad, even if they word it really well, may not result in a change. Because even if you wrote up this beautiful 10-hour video essay where you poured your heart and soul into it, stayed up for 3 weeks and didn't sleep, you are on your deathbed because you wrote this beautiful, well-constructed video essay about why something in the game is bad. It has no guarantee that it will change anything in the game because you might be the only person that has that problem. Out of 100,000 players. It's like, well, I'm not going to change the game for one person. And I'm not even if it is 10% of the player base wants that change, or 50% of the player base, I may need to wait until enough of those people make their voices heard to know that there is that majority, or there is that significant number of people. It's like I'm not going to change the game the next day because you had a bad feeling. It's not the player's job to fix the game. If they say D4 bad, then that's a valid comment. The devs can ignore it if it doesn't help. I agree with you. But that player should also know that just saying D4 bad is much less likely to get anything done about it than the player who leaves that 5-paragraph essay about specifically what they don't like. I think that's fair, right? Because I agree, you're the customer, you bought the game, Whatever you say about it then is up to you, and I have no say in it. I have no part in it. That is your right, that is your freedom. However, if you leave unconstructive feedback that doesn't give me any sort of knowledge about how I can fix the game to make the game more fun for you, don't be offended or upset when nothing gets fixed. Gives up will ignore constructive criticism if the dev has too big of an ego. Do you mean some devs will ignore constructive criticism if the player has too much of an ego? Or the other way around? Dev itself. Do you mean that Wait, do you mean that some developers will ignore constructive criticism from the other developer? I'm confused. I'm confused. State it in a way for dumb people, and then you'll have stated it in a way that I can understand. Like the player leaves a valid feedback that the dev is too full of themselves because yeah. I mean that's what I mean is like developers are just humans too, and they can have those same they can have the same level of fallibility as anyone else. Like being a developer does not automatically make you be able to handle social interactions well, and there are tons of developers with horribly huge egos where you can place certain, and I think here's my hot take. Here's the hot take for the day. I think it's okay if developers receive feedback from 100% of the players that something is bad and here's how to fix it, and the developer chooses not to. The developer needs to know, though, that that is their market and not capitulating in a little way towards the players who are the people that pay you may result in you not getting as much money as you could get. It is your art. You own the game. However, you're marketing the game, and the choices you make and the choices you don't make will affect your bottom line. It's as simple as that. And it's another one of those like harsh realities of. That was really loud. It's another one of those harsh realities of game designers out there is that if you are a professional game designer, 99.99 times out of 100, you are expected to make a game that is marketable, that makes more money than it costs to develop. Simple as that. And I think that is one of the biggest filters of like hobbyists or indie devs once they try to go to the actual marketable scene here, is that they're now dealing with an audience that's not this big and a budget that's not this big. They're dealing with one that's this big. And so their choices can have a pretty big impact on that, and they need to be able to say, okay, I thought this would be good. It's clearly not good. The players want something else. Let's change it. No ego involved. No, I'm right, the players are wrong. You need to be really good at defending it when it needs defending, but also saying, okay, I was wrong, let's fix it. And that is really hard to do. And that can be hard even some days. Like you might just have a bad day. You might have had a falling out with your significant other. You might be getting a divorce. And all those things can affect the way that you interact. And that's, oh man, there's a lot of bad experiences where I've seen that. It's just like, okay, this person has such bad things happening in their life that they're not acting normally. And we need them to work, but we also need them to not do certain things. It's tough, man. Life is tough. It's just life. Life is life. If it says that's the way it was meant to be from the start, then that's okay. People are not obligated to play, and the devs are not obligated to change things. Yeah. But the players are also not obligated with paying for that or writing good reviews for that. The changes suggested does not fit the design or the lore, then yep, I wouldn't change that thing. I agree. Yeah. It's one of those things where you just have to be like, okay. We had that with the guy who came in to our stream and was saying you should add swords to your game. I'm sorry. Swords, shields, and bows are not part of the intended design of Golden Chronicles. You're meant to use potions as combat. You can tell me, and I don't even think that it would necessarily make the game bad. It's just not part of what I want, and I think that it would dilute the experience that we're trying to achieve. It's as simple as that. Add swords and shit. Yeah, exactly. Too bad they paid and played more than 2 hours. Well, here's another. You know what? Let's just stack on the hot takes for today. If you want to pirate a game, go ahead. If you want to play more than 2 hours of a game before you'll see if it's good or not, pirate the game. You can play it unlimited. And I'm not going to have a problem with it. All I can say is if you like the game, support the developers at some point and buy the game. Especially if the game doesn't offer a demo, I agree. I don't think that pirated sales are lost copies. I think that if piracy did not exist, right, and players had to purchase games more in order to see if they like them, I think that a vast majority of games would have much lower review scores than they currently have. Because I think that a lot of people who are on the fence about a game will pirate it and will decide then and there, okay, the game is what I want or the game is not what I want. And if the game is not what they want, they are not allowed to leave a review because they do not own the game. But if they like the game, they'll buy it. In many cases, they'll buy it. And if they don't buy it, it's probably because they don't have the money. They never intended to buy it in the first place, or something like that, right? Remember the day when games had demos? Nowadays, studios are not confident enough. I think that that's changing, though, especially with Steam Next Fest. But I won't yap on. Please continue, Tim.
In fact, you're in many ways you're hurting because you're jamming up the channel of communication with noise, with unactionable feedback. So you may think, true. Well, this may not help, but it doesn't hurt. It hurts. It jams up communication channels.
Because now developers do have to sort through that, and there are some ways to, grab batch reviews from Steam and to filter them in some ways. But it is much easier if I know that 90% of what I'm looking at is constructive versus 90% of what I'm looking at is just like meme or unconstructive feedback.
Now, devs also want to provide games with features that are most wanted, because if you say, I like hot air balloon travel, and you're the only one among millions of potential game players, you're probably not going to get that. Maybe from a solo dev, but you're not going to get a big one. So that brings me to the question of this channel, of this particular video. Do gamers even know what it is they like? And I say this because people will say they want certain features, almost that they demand certain features and that they hate other ones. But then the sales figures do not bear that out. They buy games that don't have the features they claim they demand, and they buy games with features they claim they hate. And I get that because games are an amalgamation of different features. It may have had some things you want and some things you don't.
Well, that's where the context of how that feature was implemented, right? If we go like back to fast travel and players say, I would love a game without fast travel, they probably, the context they mean is they would want a game where fast traveling is so, or the alternative to fast traveling is so much more rewarding and engaging that they don't feel a need to fast travel. Not that they want big open world game with fast travel and then just box tick to turn it off, right? I think that it's that lack of context about. I'll go back to the food analogy that I gave at the start of the video. I know that I like chicken tenders. That doesn't mean that every way that chicken tenders can be served or have been served to me have been great. I've had some shitty chicken tenders. I know that I like them. But it has to be part of that meal. It has to be made with love. It has to have good batter. Serve it with some good fries, nice sauces. That all plays a part. And it's not that I don't want sauce. Usually I don't order sauce. It's that I want sauce that complements what I'm eating and doesn't just feel like it's overriding the taste of what I'm eating. And as well, but a demo should be present. I'm always supportive of demos. I think every game should have demos. Turning into chicky tendies and nuggies review. Look, I like what I like. I do think players know what they like. They just there's so many factors to the implementation of what they like or don't like that they may not understand the context of why they're saying I wish I had a game without fast travel. You know, and you see that a lot I think with like realistic games that a lot of players, especially maybe like younger audiences, are like, I really want a game that's like real life. Like you can build anywhere in this. You can do anything. It's like GTA 10, but it's like the world is 1 by 1 ratio, and they say all these things. But if that game actually came out, it would probably not be great. It would probably be really really annoying and just not great at all. But what they really want is the game that I think engages them more and rewards that sort of like sandbox systems driven experience. And games that can successfully do that and provide that, I think are appealing to that audience more. So maybe be bad at conveying what they like. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Have an easier time saying what they don't like. I agree with that. Or even just stating that I don't like this dish. I'm sorry, chef, I don't like this dish. I can't place my finger on why I don't like it, but I just don't like it. I mean, that's fair.
Which is why it could really help when you leave feedback on that game. You say, I bought it because of these features, but I wished you had had these instead.
Yes.
But the reason sales may not bear out what it is you said you wanted is, one, you may be a minority opinion. You may really want a certain feature,
Yep.
but most people don't, or
And
they don't care.
and I think most players don't think they're the minority opinion. I accept that my views on Baldur's Gate 3 are the minority. I accept that. I don't think the game should be changed to fit my needs if players are perfectly happy with the way things are. And you know what? I would just say, I'm a game developer. I will just make the game that I've been missing and see if other people agree with me, or if I'm creating such a niche little game that there's no way that I can get $3 million, $4 million for the budget because there isn't enough return on investment there. It's possible. I don't know how minorities are. Different minority. That GTA 10 you described will come out, and people will immediately start complaining that it's too slow and boring. Yes, I mean, if we want to go around, just kind of like generalize that thing, I agree with that. And I actually think that Red Dead Redemption 2 was such a beautiful mix between slow and methodical without being boring. The designers knew exactly where to gamify certain realism and say, okay, this is enough realism to be believable and be engaging without being so slow that it's tedious and feels too much like you're just living life 2.0. And I think Red Dead 2 is probably the one of the best recent examples of that.
Care about it. And you can say everybody wants this, but not a lot of people do. I have a whole video on voiceover about that. And there were people who go, I don't care about voiceover. There are people who say I only buy games with voiceover. And there are people who said, yeah, I sometimes don't buy a game because if everything's voiced, I know it's a little rigid. But the flip side of why sales figures may not bear out your opinion is you may not guide your spending based on your beliefs. And this can be knowingly or unknowingly. You may buy a game not knowing, you didn't check the reviews and you didn't realize it did this thing you don't like.
Yeah.
That would be unknowingly. The knowingly part is when you say you don't want something, but you buy games that have it anyway because they're popular, because your friends are playing it, because it had a couple extra things you did like. Well, guess what? The devs can't figure out what's going on because people said they didn't want this, but the game sold well.
What's a good example of that recently? I think that oftentimes, recently, I've seen it the other way around, where especially like AAA developers and publishers will say, "Oh, players don't want single-player story-driven games anymore. There's no market for it." And then you'll have like the biggest banger of the last decade get dropped. That is only single player, like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 or Stalker 2, right? Where these games are selling like crazy and are just so obviously proving these big publishers wrong. I find that really funny, personally, as a gamer and as a developer, to be honest. The other way around was a little bit harder to quantify. Yeah, I'd have to think about that one. Unless you guys have some good examples. Yeah, fuck Red Dead 2. It's too damn good. Hard to achieve and compete with it. It is really hard. Yeah. RDR2 is just one of the few games where, like, as a game designer, it blew me away. Where I was like, oh my god, that's so much attention to detail, or that little thing that's part of the system, like greet antagonize. That's part of the greeting system, where you think, oh, I can just greet an NPC, and it's okay, it's cool, it's immersive, I get to say hi, fuck you to the people passing me on the street, but then there's those little bits of depth added to the system that the developers didn't need to do, but the fact that they did it makes me appreciate the game so much more. Most AAA want games as a service or online games that can justify microtransactions. I think that's just all partly related to the rise of budgets, where they have to make um, that return on investment back by broadening the appeal and or increasing the monetization. And usually it's both. $80 game is so widely appealing that it doesn't feel like it appeals to anyone. If you kill an animal in the water, they would float, and after a while, the water would get in their lungs, and they would start to slowly sink. Just Red Dead 2 is mind-blowingly good as an immersive sim.
One issue is that none of those groups, people who are minority opinion or people whose spending doesn't align with their beliefs, whether knowingly or not, none of those groups are ever going to be well served by big business, by AAA games. And it's because they literally have to go after majority opinion to try to sell better. Occasionally there's a breakthrough where a game that no one expected or ever asked for busts through and everybody loves it. That's rare. And I've talked about, with big budgets come less risk. If you have a minority opinion, or you're somebody who doesn't spend like you talk, take a look at indie games. There's a ton of them. I'm sure there's one for you.
Yep.
In fact, there are so many games out there, more games than you could ever play. There's more games out there that align exactly with how you want to play games than you could ever possibly purchase or play, and they already exist. So that leads me to the question of, why is everybody going online to complain? Because there are a ton of games that you would love. And the only conclusion I have is that you just like doing it. You just like complaining. And if that's you, that's fine. I get it. Just bear in mind, it's not helping you get better games that you want. It would be far better if you said exactly what it is you want instead of just saying what it is you don't want. And then you have to sit and have that conversation with yourself. Do you even know what it is you want? Do you know what you like?
I don't think a lot of people introspect. I'm going to be honest. As much as Tim Cain, you and I might agree that it would be great, it would be better if people could introspect more. The older I get, the more I feel as if a majority of people don't introspect at all. They just kind of like, yeah, bad. What is even 100? Who dislikes this? Keep calling people poor, look at indie games. I mean, I agree with him though. I think that I agree. I think that there is always going to be some form of indie game, by and large, that gives you the experience that you're probably missing from games that you complain about, right? You look at the people that will just say, "Oh, no good games are releasing this year." Hello? Really? Out of the probably hundreds of games that will release just in the rest of this month, hundreds, if not over 1,000, none of those games will suit your fancy? Okay. Now, I would say that some of that is, like, player opinion, right? It's all opinion. But I think another part too is that the algorithms, especially on Steam, are not super fair to indie games. It's very much, if you're already trending, Steam will keep you trending. If you're not trending, you probably won't trend. Unless you get so much traction from some external site, like a big, GIF or a YouTube video that you released, or a new trailer, or you were showcased at some convention, you're part of the turn-based strategy fest, then maybe you can get some traction. But otherwise, the likelihood is that you won't. Asmin playing and liking your game. I mean, anybody. Asmin, Co Carnage, a lot of big like YouTubers, like maybe Kevin or whoever plays your game. Especially if it's something that's like similar to Sims. You know, but that's part of like marketing, where you target the content creators that you know will help boost your game. So for me, with Colden Chronicles, I would be targeting people like Co Carnage or Dan's Gaming, not Asmin. I can pay him to play my game, but him and his audience are not the kind of people that will probably appreciate the slower paced nature of the game. Maybe they can appreciate the way that some of the narrative branches, but I promise you, if Asmin does not like games like Elder Scrolls or Fallout or even Baldur's Gate, he's not going to like my game. It might hurt me more, maybe. Yeah, it might. But getting somebody like Co Carnage or Dan's Gaming who love choice based, slower paced, narrative driven games like that, and with cool systems that you can engage in, these are the people who I know will have the audience that will return that investment to me. It doesn't mean that I can't stop somebody like Asmon from picking up my game and playing it. All I can do is contextualize. And, even if I tweeted like, yo, Asmon, I heard you're going to play my game, it's probably not a game for you. And I think that he is okay at, if he's not trying to farm the game, if he legitimately thinks I might like this game or this might be a fun game to stream, but it isn't a game for me, he will turn the game off and not say a bad thing about it. But if he knows that he can farm it for content, he'll farm it for content. He turns Stalker 2 off after a day. But I think he plays it a little bit in his free time. But he didn't say anything bad about Stalker 2. He just quit. He said, this is not a game for me, but I think the game's good. Turn it off. Starfield, he did not turn off right away. And I mean, fair enough, right? So it's like, I can't stop content creators from making content. It is what it is. All I can do is try to contextualize that some games are not for people that I know they're not for. Okay, this was a very long reaction. Hopefully hopefully Tim feels like the content was worth it. I think there were some things that I agree with and disagree with on Tim on this one. I don't remember what they were, but I'm sure that people with better memories than me would remember them. All I know is that I think that gamers generally know what they want, do have a bad time sometimes stating that, although I think that everybody, if they don't know how to verbalize what they do and don't like, have a hard time discussing it. And then I also agree that for some reason people bond more over mutual dislike. I don't know the psychological reason for that, but it exists, and that it is what it is. So if you like that, thank you for watching that. I appreciate that. If you managed to get through all of it on YouTube, thank you for watching all this, and see you on the next Tim Cain reaction. So bye bye YouTube. Bye bye YouTube.